right, let's get going, huh?
Let's go, gather up. Come on now. All right, fellas, you gotta remember your body is like day-old rice. If it ain't warmed up properly, something real bad can happen. Yeah?
Athletes, take your mark. Get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Hey, buddy, there, Coach Lou Robinson here. I want to thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys doing so. Hey, as always, jump on that website, addictoathlete.org. You'll find tons of backlog podcast information about the team. And really, check out that schedule. We got some neat things on the horizon. We'd love you guys to come out and be part of the recovery experience and be able to meet Team Addict to Athlete and shoot. Even maybe buddy up with us and get one of those starting lines going. Athletes, got a great guest in studio. I love having guests in studio. It's a whole different atmosphere when we're able to get people in the room instead of through the World Wide Web. I'm excited to have Jacob Boran here in the studio today. Jacob's been a part of Addict to Athlete for quite some time, but has a very significant path and experience as he's been able to establish some recovery, not just through health and recreation and wellness, but becoming one with his mind, being able to figure some stuff out, and is now serving the populations of people in active recovery by being a mentor, a sponsor, and just a guy that can, I think, be trusted with some heavier stuff because he's experienced it himself. Jacob, welcome to the podcast, brother. Let's jump into this. Introduce yourself to the listeners, although most of our listeners probably know who you are, but believe it or not, we have a lot that don't know you. So jump in here, tell us about yourself. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Yeah. Name's Jacob Boran. I was raised here in Utah. I have a little bit over 6 years of sobriety, about 6.5.
That's awesome.
Years. And yeah, I was raised here. I love participating in races, ultra marathons, any type of fitness type activities, road biking and such as well.
Dude, that was, I remember like probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I saw you, we were at an Addict Athlete softball game. And we went there and checked out the team, sitting there watching them play City League ball. And you were there, and I'm like, man, you say, hey, Blue, how's it going? I'm like, oh, man, just trying to get this goofy team together for this Salt the Saint bike race. And you kind of perked up, and you're like, dude, I'm a cyclist. I'm like, Jacob, shut up. You are not. Like, I need you on this team. I had no idea that you had a history of road cycling with your dad and just to a certain degree. You and I probably rubbed shoulders once or twice, like in the UVU curriculum series and things of that nature. But I thought that was awesome. And I had no idea, because I knew you were an avid runner, but I had no idea that you had a passion for cycling. That was pretty interesting. Tell me a little bit about that growing up.
It's my dad always cycled. I watched him cycle a lot. And I got into it for a few years in my 20s, while my life wasn't completely burned to the ground. I wasn't doing good things, but I was still, in your 20s, you can participate in physical activities and beat yourself down pretty hard. And, and that's where I gained an appreciation for that sport. The competitive nature of doing crits,
the discipline of
the longer rides. I really love the longer rides and seeing, kind of what, your limits are. And I really fell in love with that for a period of time.
Yeah.
In my 20s, and kind of fortunate that I did, so I can go back to it now today, and participate in those things.
So awesome. Well, brother, tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about your history, your story. Tell me a little bit about, how things went from, and I think this is so interesting about us in addiction recovery, is that life typically kind of starts off like fine. As we grow and become more aware, we start to kind of be a little bit more, I think, aware of maybe family conflict, social conflict, emotional turbulence, high schools, all these things. And then one day we find this substance that kind of fills the void of something that we're feeling. And instead of like saying, all right, that's enough, some of us take it to that next level. And then the beauty, I think, about anyone's story, any sports team, any legend out there, is the comeback. It's the comeback story, the underdog, so to speak. Walk us through a little bit about your history, and let's jump into that comeback story, because I think that's where the real inspiration kind of like feeds into us, maybe learning from one another.
Yeah. So I always, from a young age, probably 12, 13, I found drinking or any substance. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I did a lot of substances from an early age. It doesn't really matter the substance, but anything that altered my state, anything that changed like the way I was feeling, took me out of myself. I wanted more of, and I could not like go through school, go through life, anything I participated in, I had to be altered in some fashion. Now, whether that was over the counter drugs, illicit drugs, whether that was alcohol, that was any substance I had to have, from a young age. When I got expelled from school several times.
Where did you grow up?
Lone Peak, Alpine.
Okay. Yeah.
So I wasn't able to complete high school. And in high school, I had the worst name for drinking. I think I had 9 underage consumption tickets before I got expelled the last time at school. So
9.
Drinking and, like I said, any substance that was, I had to have, and it was a weird thing. I was never angry. I was never mad, but it was something that people liked me more, or maybe I just thought people liked me more.
Yeah.
I was happier. I wasn't crawling out of my own skin. I've always loathed my own existence and hated my own existence. And that was the one thing that I felt okay with me. And so I carried that on. And for a long time that worked. For a long time it worked. I was, even though I was expelled from school, I still excelled somewhat in my career path. In positions, in my employment, I held higher positions, responsible roles, and did well, exceeded, even while I altered myself constantly. But it only worked for so long before it didn't work.
Right.
Right. And, those substances would change, throughout the years from one to the other. And the one that kind of took things over for me is where my life, when homelessness and other things came into the picture, was heroin, and any opiate. I mean, the power of that drug, because any emotional pain, any physical pain, whatever pain or whatever, anything that you were suffering from, when I took that, it all went away.
Yeah.
All of it went away.
Yeah.
It's that magic elixir that just took everything away. But it also took everything in my life away.
Yeah. Comes at a price. Yeah.
Having high positions and like with my employment, and titles and things like that, to the point that I couldn't even hold a job anymore. I couldn't function in any position, let alone those positions, and then, I went from having things like having a house, having cars, having a marriage, having things, to having literally nothing. And, living out of storage units, being homeless for periods of time, until my health got pretty bad.
Right.
When my health got pretty bad, I spent you get to a point where you just don't care.
Right.
And I was definitely at that point, in 2015 and 16, when incarceration, was constant. I was in jail for a few months, out for a month, back in for a few months, in for a month, it just back and forth. And then I just stopped caring. I was hoping that drug would take my life. I hated, letting people down, using people, because that's what all my relationships were transactional. I used everybody that I was around, whether it was for validation or material needs or whatever I had to manipulate or switch around. Like, that's what I had to do, so I hated myself so much for that. And so my health got really bad. And that's when I finally opened up to giving treatment a go.
Is that what it was? Like, you're like, maybe I should do something about it. Like, tell me about that switch, about that aha moment. Like, maybe there's a better way.
So, there was a few incidences with overdoses in ERs and hospitals, that kind of a doctor at the last was, telling me I'm not going to live much longer if I continue doing this to myself. And this is somebody I had saw, I think, for the 3rd or 4th time that year.
Almost knew you by a name by then, huh?
So it was pretty clear that, my body couldn't handle much more, and I was putting it through the ringer. So him saying that, also I got mugged about the same time, broke my eye socket, and had that happen.
Gee, brother.
And at that point this is what, I went to a methadone clinic and got on methadone. And without that, I don't think I would have had enough clarity to make the decision to go to treatment.
Absolutely.
So that kind of at least gave me enough stability, not having to chase that high and manipulate and come up with a scheme to get high that day. I could dose and I could get a job, and I could start, I got enough clarity to think oh, something's messed up with you.
Right.
You need help.
Yeah.
And that gave me enough clarity, the 6 to 8 months I was on methadone, to consider treatment and actually look at that as a good alternative. Without that, stent of taking methadone, I don't think I would have had the clarity to do it. I would have just kept going.
Man, I appreciate you saying that, because there's a lot of feelings and thoughts on medicated assisted treatment, and I think it's in the right hands and in the right places can be an amazing tool. Like you said, it gave you enough of a clarity to make the next best decision, and that kept leading into the next best decision. So you decided it's time for some treatment, and you went in voluntarily, I would imagine.
There was a bunch of jail time and prison time hanging over my head, and that
gotcha.
Make the decision
for sure
going in. So, I mean, it was two sides, but of the same coin. But I mean, let me be clear. At that point, I really thought that addiction, my drug problem, my alcohol problem, like all these substances that I've abused for decades, I thought they were the problem.
Exactly. Like we all do.
I really thought I'm going to go into treatment and I just need to remove the drugs and alcohol from my body for long enough and then I'll be okay. That's, the thought that I had. And I mean, I was gravely wrong. But I mean, that's what I thought the solution was.
Makes perfect sense.
Get me away from these things and, I'll be fine. I'm pretty driven. I've had some successes in life and I'll be fine. But I mean, that wasn't the case, but at least that got me into a program.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's amazing. When we kind of have that epiphany shift where we're like, oh crud, wait a minute. I think it happens kind of almost so quickly that we don't realize that the power and the magnitude of it until a lot later. But it's kind of an interesting thing how that next best choice. But what, I mean, and when I say you went voluntarily, you still chose to go. You could have went the other direction, a little less, appealing, but you could have, because to a certain degree, it's harder, man, because now instead of just going to prison and doing your time, now you've got to do your time, but also open your heart. And that's a whole different level, isn't it?
I think you got to get to that jumping off point.
Yeah.
And I think I got to that jumping off point. To continue doing what I was doing is going to be harder than doing something new that I'm uncomfortable with.
100%.
And I think everyone has to get to that point, whatever that point is for you. And I got to that jumping off point that I just couldn't. I knew I couldn't go on like I was going on.
Yep.
I knew I wouldn't be around. I didn't have enough love for myself at the time to do it for me, but I have the most amazing parents and kids and so many other people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That I thought deserved it, and I needed to do something so that I'm not just a raging pile of shit, everyone has to deal and see, with the repercussions of being associated with me. Cause that's what it was at that time.
Which is freaking mind blowing to hear you talk like that, because you said something moments ago about, you using people and taking advantage of all that. And to know you and to have you sitting in here 6 years past all those shenanigans. I don't know Jacob Boran that way. I know Jacob Boran, who is the biggest open heart, shirt off your back, like I'll go the distance with you. I can't even fathom that part of you because I've never seen it. And when people hear that from me and from you, because dude, I've been clean now since 1996. That's a freaking lifetime ago. People, they look at me, they're like, "There's no way, Blue." I'm like, I was bad. I was in deep stuff. To kind of contrast that means you always had that ability in you to give your heart. But I think that's what makes people that struggle with addictions even more complex, is that we don't use because we want to backstab, cheat, steal, rob, and lie. We do it because we're carrying a lot of pain. We're carrying a lot of everyone's pain, our pain, family's pain, friends' pain, whoever. And when we finally start saying, hey, I only have the capacity to carry mine, but I'll be here for you to help you carry yours. Man, that is such a huge shift. Does it kind of shock you now to remember, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's always, a constant, because who we were back then shapes who we are now. But isn't it wild to look back and see how far you're like, dude, I never want to be that person again, because it feels so much different being on this side. Even though you have ups and downs, you struggles, there's hard. I mean, that's what life is. Can you believe how far, like, away you were from like where you are now? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah. I mean, it always amazes me. It's weird. It's a part of life that I never could have envisioned at any point in my existence, that like life could be this good. It's good in the ways that it's good now.
Absolutely.
Not with monetary things, because that's what I always thought was important. Having that job title, having that position, having that car, having that house, having that girl, like whatever the thing was, like I always thought that was connected with success and, the relationship, like what true happiness is, being content, having serenity, all
Peace.
things. I never really even were on the spectrum in my 20s or 30s. I know I was pretty miserable, and I know I was numbing quite a bit and pushing all the feelings and emotions down, all the things that I get to experience right now, and there is hard things. There's those feelings, those emotions, and that stuff I get to work through today. But what's on the other side of them is great relationships.
Yeah. That's what it's really all about.
Having some peace, having the capacity that I have now to actually be there and help somebody in a good way. Like I didn't know how to not be codependent. I mean, and that's still something I consistently work on now.
Right.
How to really be there for somebody struggling and how you do that and how you show up for that person. Like before, I just want to take their pain away. Yeah. Now I know better. Like, I tried that in the pain. And dude, you know what I mean? The constant learning and evolution of this thing has been such a beautiful thing to experience. Raw, like all the emotions, all the feelings that I get to go through and I get to learn today, that hopefully I can serve a purpose, like for my children, for anyone else that comes into my life. Hopefully I can be a benefit, because I've taken so much my entire life.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? In every capacity. I was so needy and so insecure. I needed so much validation. So I just took, and I know if I do this till I die, I won't give back enough.
Wow. Yeah, man.
Being there for others.
So what you're saying then too is that your whole understanding of what success truly looked like completely shifted, because you used the word lost. Like you lost everything. Everything was taken from you. You got to a point where I would say scarcity was probably a common experience, or a common friend of yours. But when all was lost, when all was taken, when all was kind of surrendered, how did you switch that mindset of scarcity into that mindset of abundance with really little to nothing? Does that make sense? Your definition of success must be very different than what it was.
It is different. Getting through the times in the beginning, like I couldn't even really put to words what that was like, because I was pretty agnostic to any faith or religion or spirituality. There was a lot of pain connected to that, resentment with I needed to have a shift of perspective of how I looked at those things. But the examples of the people around me kind of led that way, and having faith in I've tried every other option. Like I've tried controlling my drinking, controlling my using, do it in moderation. Like I've tried every other resource fathomable that I could come up with to cure or alleviate whatever problem I was going, and nothing worked.
Right.
And I'm fully in the belief that like we do this together. It's with other people. I have to have help or I'm lost.
Right. Right.
That's something I never want to acknowledge. I wanted to be that guy that pulled himself up by his bootstraps and did this himself. And it's not that way. Yeah. Everything I have now is not from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not from me.
You know what's cool about you though, Jacob, that I really appreciate is that you found a marriage in your recovery that's been, not just with Addict to Athlete's philosophy of movement equals healing, but you have a deep respect and love for the 12 steps. And I think you honor that very well. Before we started recording, we're talking about a mutual friend that we have that you're your mentor and sponsor to. And to me, Addict to Athlete was never meant to be a replacement for the 12 steps. It was supposed to be an addition to. And I think you have done such a beautiful job eloquently, like combining multi-paths to recovery into what's created your success, thus far in recovery. Tell me a little bit about the path of the steps for you too, because I'm a firm believer they're guaranteed to work if you work them correctly. And if you don't bullshit them, and if you do lean into it, and if you do give it your heart, you can get to a step 12, which is what you're doing now, serving and giving it back. But I'm curious, how hard was it for you to kind of latch onto it? Like you said, you're pretty agnostic. You're kind of like, whatever. I don't know if you noticed, but the 12 steps kind of a spiritual program.
It's absolutely.
How did you dive into it?
I had tried, I exhausted every other method. My ways led me to darker places. And so I knew going to treatment centers, I went to a lot of treatment centers and everyone pushes the 12 steps, and I've done them halfly, but I've never fully done them where all of it, no exceptions. Because at the beginning, when I used to do this thing, I would say that's applicable. That's not. That's applicable. I'd pick and choose what I
cherry
wanted to
picking
do.
what you want. Yeah.
Like what I thought was applicable to me, because my decision making was grand. It landed me in a lot of great places. But I mean, for whatever reason, we still do that when we're sick, right? Like I wanted to pick and choose. The moment I stopped picking and choosing, and I just did it regardless whatever my opinion was, you just do it. That spiritual side of this program was the hardest side for me to overcome. But I mean, it was simple as this: like, what do you got to lose? I mean, having a great sponsor that walked through a lot with me,
beautiful,
was amazing. And we overcomplicate everything. It's not complicated.
I've noticed.
You say a few prayers, you put stuff out there. Whatever your concept of a higher power is. Like mine's evolved tremendously over the years, and I think that's how it's supposed to be.
Growth.
It's
growth.
I hope it's supposed to be.
It is.
Mine continuously changes as long as I try to grow and improve that contact with that power greater than myself in whatever capacity, whatever ways work for me. I try to, continue that growth, because I know that's where my sickness is. I truly am in belief that it's a spiritual sickness. I mean,
I agree.
Way in the big book how it's explained.
I agree with that. I think you described that beautifully, brother, because a lot of us have a misconception on that higher power like concept, because to me, it's always, when you say a power greater than yourself. I remember when I was working with a kid years ago as a therapist, at Utah County Division of Substance Abuse. And he was like, my higher power is a doorknob. And I challenged him, because I've heard that before. And it's a great little tagline, but I'm like, what about it? And I made him get very descriptive as to why. The power that you have about grabbing the doorknob, the twisting of it, the mechanisms inside. I said, if you're going to call it your doorknob, then it's the power and the movement of going through the door once you've turned it. Like and once I started doing that, and he started getting into like the intricate parts, like, my higher power is a universe. I'm like, okay, why? Trying to be funny. I'm like, dude, organized confusion up there. Everything's in perfect balance. There's change, there's chaos, there's beauty. I'm like, if it really is a universe, dig into it. And it's kind of cool when you slow things down to see the majesty, the beauty, the strength of the power in something like that. So I'm so happy that you described it that way, that if you're going to choose a higher power, it can be anything. But why is it that? Does that make sense? Yeah. And I love that concept of a higher power.
For me, I've had a hard time defining it. Like, I don't want to put a title to it.
That's humble, though. Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's face the facts. Like, I thought I knew a lot before I got sober. And it turns out, like, I know absolutely nothing.
I'm
okay with knowing nothing. That leaves me open to things I wouldn't have been open with before.
Well said.
And it's that humility and having that perspective is why I think it's so like, I'm an ego-driven, selfish person. And unless I keep it that way, things get out of hand. Like, I don't know, and anything could be true. And I don't want to discredit any of it. I want
absolutely
all of it, and the beauty that's there, because there's always beauty there if we're open to it.
Man,
and I know I most of my life I shut a lot of doors to that beauty because I thought I knew better, or I had whatever bad experience that turned me off from something, and it was such a disservice to myself.
Yeah, man.
And I fed that that anger, and it led me nowhere. Staying open to all things, like whatever it is, whatever it might be, whatever I pray to, whatever I put, where I spend that time trying to connect to that. Like, I don't know what it is, but I'm happy I'm connecting to it. I'm happy it's guiding me. I'm happy I can turn my will over to something greater and do, God's work, whatever and help God's children. I mean, that's
what we're here for. Dude. All right, listeners, if you're struggling right now with the emotional turbulence in the world, specifically about this little past election we had, rewind this about 2 minutes and listen to what Jacob just said, because that's the concept of getting through anything that doesn't feel good. It's about being able to do exactly what he just said. So, Jacob, I'm curious, man. One day, all of a sudden, Jacob Boran appears at Addict Athlete. I'm not sure how you found it. I'm not sure what you did. The thing that sticks out the most to me about you was, and the first time I really got to know you was when me and you, our kids, and Tim Sedgley volunteered literally at the doorway of the pandemic when we all went down and did an aid station for vacation races down in where was that?
Page,
Arizona. And we were up all night helping athletes and runners and stuff. And I remember you just had this itch, like, I got to go. I want to run. I want to do this. And I'm like, Jacob, do you have any idea like what this is? And you did. You took off and ran with Rob and the other guys. I ran to Rob's station and stuff and came back. But like, I'm like, dude, that guy's a natural athlete. I'm curious, how did you find the team? How did you start reawakening that athlete inside of you? Because you're an incredible athlete, man. You've done some amazing things. You've done quite a few events and whatnot. I want to shift gears a little bit because everything you've just spoke about have also been found, I think, for you on the trail. From that lining up, not knowing what you're going to expect, but have faith in your abilities to finish, to do all these things. You've worked through injury, you worked through experience. I mean, I'm curious, what turned that light back on for you? Because you're an avid runner and, like you're dang good at it. I'm curious, how did you tell me a little bit about that section?
Yeah, I can't even remember how I knew about your program. Several people, because everyone tried to help me because I was a wreck, like mentioned like, try Addict athlete, try this, try that. And so I came once and, I made friends with the people that had been here for a while. Tim was a huge mentor, and people like that, they were smart enough because I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
They were smart enough to tell me that it was easy.
Yeah.
I remember I helped at Windy Pass for Squaw Peak 50.
That's right.
That was the first thing that I volunteered for. We were hiking up there. We were camping, which I'm comfortable and I love that stuff. But I didn't know what this was. And to be honest, I had so many community service hours and so much shit. And Tim told me that come do this. He'll give me community service hours.
Yeah. You're like, fine.
There was no athlete that I was trying to come out. I was just like, oh shit, I can take care of a bunch of my community service. Like, game on. Like,
by camping? Let's go.
Camping and helping runners. That's cool. Like, I'll go. And then I saw people running that thing that were just average Joes, just normal people.
And for those listeners that don't know, describe Windy Pass, because that's no easy spot to get to hiking up, let alone running it.
It's about 6 miles up to Windy Pass, and I think it's like 3,500 feet of gain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not a great trail. It's a lot of loose rocks, not the greatest trail.
And as you're carrying supplies and watermelons and all kinds of crap.
But I mean, you got to consider, I've always been the type that I don't like myself. So like, putting myself through hard things, like I kind of think like, oh, you deserve it. You're a piece of shit. So like doing anything like that's always connected to me because I've never had any respect or love for myself. So like beating myself up would be like, yeah, you deserve it. So like,
it makes sense.
That concept of things like, so going up there, it was fun. I could take care of that. But Tim convinced me, and Chris is Tibley.
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Chris,
so
come hang out.
They told me how easy this was. They told me it was easier than a marathon. I'm like, and so they fed
lied
my
to you
ears with all this stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
And then the next year, I ran that race. I ran Squaw Peak 50 for my first.
See, that's why we always lose our volunteers to that race, because you get up there and you kind of get inspired a little bit, and you're like, dude, wait, if they're like these average Joes can do this, maybe I can. So your first one was like the year after. You're like, let me give this a shot.
Yeah.
What'd you think that first go around? Because Squaw Peak,
so I didn't know what I was doing, and thank God I didn't, because I probably would have quit.
Exactly.
If I would have known more about it and what was going on, but I just kept going. I didn't get a great time. I think it was like 14 or 15 hours.
But you finished.
Which isn't horrible.
No.
But I mean, I finished with the sun was up. And what an accomplishment to do something that's hard, that's super hard like that. And it's funny because I was training with Tim and a few others, and I was so worried about being prepared. I trained more than they did.
You
and
overtrained?
I think it's because I have a thing in my mind, like I don't want to start something I can't finish. And
beautiful.
So, I wanted to do enough training so I could finish it. So
dude,
finished that race, and that meant a lot. And Tim registered me for another race that year, which was Tushers. Which is a hard race. And I mean, these are the only races I'm exposed
Describe
to.
Tushers, because I'm still kind of foreign to Tushers, but I've heard horror stories. So tell me a little bit about Tushers. What's that?
I did the shorter version. They have a 70K and 100K. Tim and everyone else was doing that 100K, and I just didn't feel ready enough. So I did the 70.
And this is in central Utah, Beaver, Utah, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
and I didn't know they had beautiful landscapes and mountains like that.
It's a lot more elevated.
What makes is that what makes it more difficult?
There's a lot of climbing, and then a lot of the stuff is so technical, it's not runnables, and they're cut off really strict. And so it's not a race that their permit's only good for so long. And so
gotcha.
the year that I did the 70K, I think I was the second to last or third to last person that came through.
Beautiful.
The 70K.
Beautiful.
But then you found out, like, out of everyone that started, there's like 140 people that started, and there was only 70 that finished. And I was like 70, or I was like 69th or something like
Amazing.
that. You know?
Yeah.
So not many people start to finish these things, you know, and so it was just a hard race. But that was what I thought it was about. Like, that was my only exposure to it. The year after that, I did the 100K, and then I found easy races, and good that I didn't find those.
And what are those easy races? I'd like to know what you call easy, brother.
I mean, there's Arches, Dead Horse,
still decent trail runs, man.
But they're not the climb.
Not like
that's not the misery and the stuff you get from like doing touch.
Well, I'm glad you said that. Maybe I'll tip my toe in one of them then.
Because that's you know, actually you can run the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in conditioning, you can actually run the whole thing. Like Tushers is like a hike.
I've heard that, man. I've heard that. But that's the beauty of it, man. Like, I'll never forget, like, just watching, and no, I wasn't stalking you and staring at you, but the atmosphere that you brought when we were down there in Page, and just this, you were like this, I want to go. And it was cool because, like, you did, like I don't know what time it was at night and stuff, but early morning, you went out and ran and came back, and I think you ran again past that, and I'm like, dude, this guy's, he's got to move. And I thought that was so beautiful. I like watching when people come on board to start seeing, like, I'm worth this. I can do this. But then smack dab in the middle of some pretty good goals you got there, knee issues, knee problems. How have you worked around that and not let it sink your ship? Because you were like, I'm retiring after this season. Yeah, every once in a while I still see pictures of you running. So what's going on?
You know, I didn't realize, like, I probably overtrained quite a bit. I probably took on more than I should and ran.
Which is kind of an addict mindset, you know, to a certain degree. Mm-hmm.
Running helped so much with my mental health. I can't even put to words how much it did.
Exactly.
And then not only that, the running community, not with Addict to Athlete,
Spot
all
on.
the people that had done it before me that were so like mentors and helped you. But then not only that, just the regular running community, the people you would meet, like, it's just a beautiful group of people to be around, you know, and it just made it addictive. And then you see these people that do tons, and I thought, like, oh, that's what I watched them train on Strava, and I think that's how I'm supposed to
be doing it. Yeah.
And to be completely honest, like, my most success as far as completions and times and improving, I've cut my training down at least a third.
See, you're like, wait a minute,
what I was doing. And just because I had watched these people that would over succeed, and they're doing, you know, 70 miles a week. That's what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And it turns out, like, that's how I had a lot of pains, how I got hurt. I never gave enough time for my body to recover.
See?
And then not only that, like, cross training with cycling, I do just as much gym and weightlifting.
See,
now,
me too. I hear you.
It's made huge difference on my.
See, that's the beauty of it, right? Too much of anything can make you an addict. So when you spread the training, the cross training, the rest time, all that kind of stuff, when you start becoming like I would say efficient in physical, like, agility, it's amazing how you start feeling that way. But that's like addiction. Like, I'm going down this path, but there's so much you're missing. So it's the same kind of mindset. I want to throw a little wrench in our little system here, and bring something up that I've wanted to talk to you about for so long. Because I want your thoughts on it. 2 years ago, you and I were on another biking quest. This was called what was that, dude? Saint to Sinners? Where were we? Salt Lake to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Now, listeners, let me set the scene for you, okay? We're a bunch of goofballs on bikes, and we start this thing, and we're doing great. And then, lo and behold, once Jacob finds us, because his alarm didn't go off, and he was kind of in his head a little bit, he gets on his bike and starts hitting wind. And every time Jacob was on the bike, you had this freaking headwind from hell. And there was one section that I watched you get real in your head, get real mad, and then immediately, once it was over, like, about face. And I just kind of sat back and I watched, and I was like blown away, because I've been there, man. I know exactly how you felt. But I also love the fact that when it was over and you had time to think about it, you're like, holy shit, where did my mind go? To me, that was the most beautiful, I think, representation of not just addiction recovery, but like us and some of the stuff we go through, listeners, because all of you are going to go through times where life's going to be great. and you're going to get this headwind, and it's going to suck, and you're going to get mad, and the people around you are going to be like, what's wrong with this guy? And then you're going to have this clarity of like, ooh, shiz, maybe I better slow this down and reevaluate. It was the most beautiful metaphor for recovery, but I'm like, I want to talk to Jacob about this. How do I get him in the podcast here? Dude, tell me a little bit about that, because so many of us get in the mindset, like maybe life, right? And we're at a job and stuff starts not going our way and we start getting all upset and stuff. But then we have a moment of clarity. We're like, all right, this isn't about anything else but me. Jacob, you learned a ton about yourself. And I'll be honest with you, that race was very disorganized, but we freaking kicked its butt. Tell me a little bit about your experience, man, because by the time we crossed that finish line, my respect for you for staying and doing what you did rose exponentially, like to the heavens, dude. Beyond like 10% respect, you went to 1 million, dude. Because I'm like, that was cool.
From what I remember, I got bitter. I did wake up late that morning and met you guys kind of partially through.
It was awesome. Yeah.
And, I always have super high expectations of myself. And then I let that bleed off. Like, this is a group event and it wasn't just about me. And that's why I struggle with certain things with other people. And it's a constant learning thing that I need to take a back seat and, not put my expectations on other people, because I tend to just do that. And I think that's what I ended up doing. I remember when I got frustrated, when I had enough, is there was a less experienced rider that I was trying to get to draft off me so I could take the win. So I went out with him.
So you were sacrificing, right? You were sacrificing.
It wasn't my leg. I wasn't even supposed to be riding, but I wanted to make sure we went through this area efficiently, because I had times and expectations of where we should be. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure we're there by getting in front of this guy so he can draft off of me. And he just didn't understand that concept of drafting, wasn't comfortable with it. And it was a brutal win.
Oh my gosh, dude, it was rough, you guys.
And I can take a brutal win. I can go through that punishment, but he would not stick on my back tires. So he would get caught back in the wheel and I'd have to stop, let him catch back up and tell him again.
Listeners, literally stop, not like slow down. Yeah. Stop.
And so he just wouldn't grab my back wheel and he would want to go sit back in the wind and suffer himself. And I'm trying to alleviate that. And he just didn't get the concept. And it was a 20-mile stretch of like pretty brutal wind. And
dude, it was brutal.
He wouldn't stick on my wheel. And I'm not even out here because I'm supposed to be riding. I just want us to be efficient.
Tell me, pause for 1 second, because you bring up a beautiful metaphor, brother. Tell me about that in the world of recovery. When you have the tools, you have the teaching, you have the willingness to say, I've got you, like follow me, but they don't. Dude,
well, that was,
isn't that rough?
I got super frustrated and I wanted to stop because I felt like, a lot of people were there that were less experienced. And in my mind,
a lot of us were there.
In my mind, it's just like, we're not even going to make it. I don't want to get partially down to Vegas and end up like,
when they told me that you were thinking about throwing a chat towel, I'm like, we're screwed because Jacob's our anchor. Yeah.
If we're going to get cut, I don't even want to put in this effort, and I don't want to put in effort if people can't follow simple things. And to me, it's simple, but it wasn't to him. And it's my lack of having any understanding of his perspective.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see it through my eyes and I'm right. And this is the problem that I have in my life.
On my side.
I'm right. My perception, he didn't understand it. He was new to cycling. I mean, love, compassion should be the rule that I followed, and I did not.
Well, but here's the deal too, though. On my side too, like hearing kind of like some of the fault and stuff, I thought, why am I not out there with them? So to me, it was almost like we're kind of using Jacob, and he's our anchor and he's our strongest rider. But if we burn him out, and I had to take a serious look, like, why am I not out there? Because it all sounds fun when you're handing out these legs for these stage races until you're out there. So many people, myself included, were like, hey, I'll trade you this leg for that leg. And, it's like, so for me, I'm like, I've got to step up. I've got to do my part too. So it's so interesting how all this dynamic went. But you bring up that point of like having to stop and wait and putting yourself out there. And it's so frustrating. I look at our parents and the people that love us, that see us faltering and struggling, yet we're like slowing down in our addictions and we're like, taking advantage of the situation. And like you said, why would you want to be out here for longer than you have to? Get on my will. Which means you're going to have to pedal. It's going to be uncomfortable. We got to get there. Sometimes people don't realize that it takes a shitload of work, doesn't it?
It does, but people that don't ride, I'm
not talking about riding, I'm talking about life in general, right? Like, it is hard. Sometimes you can't have fun. You can't go to that party. You can't hang out with those people that you really love and respect. Sometimes you have to get out there and pedal in the wind.
Yeah.
And some of us are like, it's not worth it to me. It's heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is heartbreaking. I worked at sober livings for a long time and worked with a lot of guys. And I still, a lot of those guys today, I get the opportunity of helping because I was in that position for so long, and it's so heartbreaking to be on the other side of this thing. Cause I was the hopeless guy for so long.
Yeah.
And so seeing them and the struggle and just it's one of those, it's those stupid cliches, things are bad, but only for so long.
Exactly.
And it's a concept I understand now, but I remember I wanted to say the fuck it's all the time. The moment it got hard, the moment it was a struggle, that's when I'm just done.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that, good times and bad times, it always ends. It always ends.
Yeah, it passes.
And so hold on. If it's good, hold on.
Hold on.
If it's bad, hold on.
Spot on, dude. I love it, brother.
It's gonna shift. And it's having the consistency or I guess the knowledge, the maturity, whatever, however you want to, whatever term you want to place on it, to realize okay, it's hard right now. Hold tight. It's gonna get better.
Yeah.
But the thing is I gave up my whole life to learn that. It took me so long to learn that.
I agree.
And you want to shake people when they don't get it. Just give it another day.
Give it another day.
Hold on.
Yeah.
It's going to get better. There's going to be opportunities that come up. And there are things that you're not able to see or understand that are going to happen. But you got to be able to stop trying to control it, steer the ship, and just let things be.
Yeah.
Get your hand out of it, because usually you're the one fucking it up.
Dude,
take your hand out of it and just let it be and have some peace for a second, because these are things that I still have to do to this day, and I just know better now. I just know better. Just hold on.
Yeah.
Don't make, because I'm impulsive. I'll make the stupidest reaction. My solution to anything is to make some huge change in my life. Struggling at work, I'll quit. Get another job,
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever comes up, I just need to change this and I'll be happy. And it's just there's no happiness in that.
Seriously.
Just hold tight. It'll get better.
Yeah.
It'll shift. And the same thing with the good times too. They don't continue.
Yeah.
Cherish them when they're there, for sure. But just I'm smart enough to know, don't get too happy, because you know what's going to happen.
You bring up a good point, because so many of my clients are I'll ask them, what do you want? And they always say, well, I want to be happy.
Yeah.
Well, dude, that's going to happen in a few minutes. That's going to happen in an hour. It's going to happen tomorrow. You want more than just that. Just happiness. That's a temporary thing, and it needs to be that way. The one thing you said that struck out to me too, especially listen, if you're new into recovery, or you have a loved one that struggles, think about this, what Jacob just said. I have a buddy whose dad passed away. He was actually on his bike riding to work a couple years ago. A lady didn't scrape off her, windshield, thought she could go to work, stops at thought what she thought was the place to stop when a Utah rail train was going by, the transit train, and pushed him into the train, and killed him. And at his funeral services, it was so heartbreaking, but at his funeral services, my friend Nick said something so powerful. He said there was a time that his dad took him and his siblings up to this cabin they'd never been to. And by the time he got there, it was snowy. The car couldn't go anymore, and they had to walk the last almost mile. And he's like, I'll never forget the way he described this. He said, as they were trudging up this hill, he's like, we're going to die on it. This kid's maybe 9 years old. He's like, my dad's going to kill us on it. We're dead. And for some reason, his dad turned around and said to both him and his brother, hey, you may not know where this cabin is, but I do. All I need you to do is just keep following me, stay very close to me, and we're going to get there. So even though you don't know, I do. We're almost there. And I'll never forget that. We've got to listen to some of these people that have done things before us, that mentorism, so to speak, that sponsorship, so to speak, to say, all right, I don't know where we're going, but I trust you enough that you do, that I'm going to lean into this. So the metaphors that you've just kind of spoke about today, brother, powerful, super powerful. I think that you listeners out there are being well fed with this. So I'm curious then, brother, because you have experienced the same setbacks and follies in life and whatnot. What's been that one kind of mainstay to say, I don't ever want to get back there? Because I have a few of those of I can remember 1996. I know where my life was back then, man. I know what it was like to be maybe it's better if I'm just not here. And by the grace of God, I'm here. I'm curious, what's been that kind of consistency within your life that's been it's not worth my sobriety for this. I want to maintain it because I'm not going back.
You know,
I'm sure it evolves and changes.
The rock bottoms, you know, it's funny. I don't view them the same way I used to. You know, starting over, going to jail, losing all your shit, having nothing, having to start from nothing. Like I always thought that was like the worst thing.
Yeah.
No, you get comfortable there. And that's where I got comfortable. Like all those rock bottoms are the shittiest place you could picture. Like I've been to them, and you know what? I've been to them multiple times, and I was comfortable there, and I thought that's what I deserved.
Yeah.
Those rock bottoms weren't like those things weren't the rock bottom. The rock bottom was that feeling of like that emptiness and knowing anyone I touched, I hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that had any interaction with me, I was taking from and hurting.
Yeah.
And the low that brought, like knowing that anyone that came in my life, I was going to harm in some way, not intentionally because I was sick, but I knew ultimately that anyone that came into my life, anyone that like cared for me, I was going to harm.
Right.
And that's a place I never want to get.
That's wild.
Like feeling, utterly useless.
Yeah, brother.
That hate, that self-loathing.
Yes.
Not wanting to exist, knowing anyone I'm going to touch, I'm going to hurt. That's where I don't want to go.
I hear you.
I can start over. I mean, I could lose everything like monetarily wise, and that's not bad. That's not hard for me. I know where to go. I know what to do. I know I have motivation. I'm determined. I'm pretty self-sufficient in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not scared of those bottoms. I'm scared of losing those people.
There you go.
My kids, my parents. And then not only that, like, I don't want anyone else to feel like that.
Right. Yeah. Learn from me. Let me feel for you. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, you've found someone like that too in a very close friend of yours. I've watched her support you. I've watched her come out in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere to cheer you on the bike. It's been interesting to see kind of like, you know, for me too, the same thing. When we open our hearts up to people, it's one of those things that we have that little bit of a fear of like, you know, all the good about me, you know, all the bad about me. And for someone to be like, hey, I'm in. Isn't that a wild feeling?
It is. I mean, I had,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Too, right? Okay, good.
I had such a toxic relationship with females. A lot of that was like, I wanted to blame the females, but it was me, you know, not feeling worthy of anyone decent.
To push them away.
They mistreated me, unless they treated me bad. I didn't go after it because, like, you know what, they probably deserve better.
Yeah.
Getting to the point and being in a healthy relationship, you know, thank God for Lauren and her patience with me, because we broke up.
Oh boy, she's got
several times, and not because of something happening. It was too good. It was too calm, and you know, like in my mind, it's too calm. Like I don't know what to do with calm. I don't know what to do with healthy, and dealing with those feelings and emotions that come with it, like that internal belief that I'm not good enough, that I shouldn't be with somebody like this, that she's so good to me. Like
I don't deserve it.
The highs were so high, the lows were so low, and just being with someone that's consistent.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it?
Love and the safety. And I didn't realize how important feeling safe was.
Beautiful.
And in relationships and from our childhood and all the traumas that come with life, like safety is a huge thing. And it's something I didn't realize that I've been searching for my entire life, just to be safe.
Absolutely.
And she's brought that. And when no one else has. And I've even tried to push it away.
I hear you.
You know, I pushed it away because of, you know, my own internal beliefs of not being enough. And
we all do that.
Fight through those things and have somebody that stuck by me through my all my toxic shit. Yeah. You know, and she stuck through it and showed me that safety, that peace that I've never been able to feel with another human.
Dude, that's awesome. You know, same thing with Marissa when we started dating. I remember when we were dating and stuff, I was so screwed up, man. I mean, therapist was like, don't marry this guy when she's talking to him. But the coolest part about that was, I remember the first time I got really sick, and she was like hanging around me, and she's like bringing me like food, and like, you know, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, because in my family, if you got sick, you were like quarantined. No one even came around you. They didn't know. Yeah. And I'm like, she's like, well, I care about you. And to me, I'm like, that is so freaking foreign. How weird is this? So I know exactly what you're saying. And every listener out there that struggled with addiction has this problem specifically, Jacob. I know they do. Allowing themselves to love and to be loved, because it's one of those things that we're just not used to doing, huh? Like, I've watched it.
I'm feeling worthy of it all. Like, and still, I know these are all struggles I'm going to continue to have unless I work through
Absolutely
those things and let the things in that are there in my life.
Yep.
The things I've always wanted have been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I didn't think I deserved them.
See?
So like all the answers to all my problems have been right at my fingertips. I just didn't want to grab them because I didn't think I deserved them. I didn't think I was worthy of
It's a
them.
big one.
But all the answers were right in front of me. I just had to believe I deserved them and to take them.
It's a hard thing to think about. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around. And you can't be surprised by it because now you figured it out. Like,
now I know that they were there the whole time, and I can't use it and play victim anymore because it was there.
There you go.
The opportunities were there. Those people were there, you know, and I pushed them all away.
Yeah.
Out of my own shit. And I get to work through that shit. You know, I get to work on my stuff, not push those away, let those things into my life.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And some days I'm better than others, you know, unfortunately I have a relationship now that's healthy, that I can say is healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, that we get to complement each other,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, work through things. You know, and I had no idea what it was like to actually be there and support another person. You know? And she's allowed me to do that and to
I love
be
that.
In that position.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which it's, you know, and I've never wanted to be that person either.
Yeah.
Until now, like, and it's kind of a beautiful thing to have those relationships, because those things now, those relationships, like with her, with my kids, with my parents, like things I didn't even knew existed.
Yeah. Like, how could it?
Know this was real? Like, this is part of life. I could feel this way. I could get so much and give so much. And like they go hand in hand.
Dude, seriously.
You can't just take, you got to give it.
You got to give it.
That's part of the satisfaction with it.
Man.
Like, and you know, so it's been a beautiful process to be a part of. And, you know, it's gotten better year after year, week after week, month after month, as long as I keep applying myself and keep that open mind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know.
Well, what you're describing is awesome. It's not just growing old with somebody; it's healing together. That's what you both are doing. The coolest part I think about you two that I've absolutely adored watching is that you introduced her to running in some recreation. I had no idea that she wasn't this elite ultra runner. I thought that's how you two met, because she is such a natural athlete too. And it's kind of a cool thing that like you guys can share that together. I mean, you've went out and supported her. She's supported you in these events, and it's something that you guys have uniquely together. And I had no idea that it was your fault that you introduced her to that. You know, like how cool is that too, that like she sees a passion that you have and she's like, well, let me try it. And that you allowed her, and I say that kind of like tongue in cheek, to join you, because so many times we want this just for us. But for you, you're like, well, this is better together. Like, you know,
yeah,
I think that's awesome, man. Like that you guys can share that.
The sense of accomplishment of doing anything hard, you know, and that'll vary and change, you know, with as we do it more. But like I mean, there's so much fulfillment of getting through hard things, or getting through things that you didn't think you could get through.
Agreed.
I mean, that aspect of like my sobriety or my recovery has been pivotal. Like to take on these tasks that like you didn't even know you could do, or the harder the race. Like I like to choose shitty races. Like this year I did Kachina. Like if it's something shitty and
I thought you were doing that, but you're nuts.
It's something that's going to be torturous. You know, I could do an easy one, but you know, I found like joy for me is the things that most people drop from, and people are going to hate, and you're going to have the low lows and the high highs. I because of my
mad respect.
Path, like I love that stuff. I want to get miserable. The more miserable I get, the more it's going to open up doors.
Freaking it, dude.
Get miserable. Get in the middle of it. Train if you can. You know, and it's just such a thing that I hope never ends.
Yeah, I don't think it will. In one way, shape, or form, I think you can recreate that. But that's the coolest thing too is, you know, early on the team's inception, I remember thinking, you know, you use this as emotional leverage for the future, meaning like, dude, next time you have something really hard, you're like, yeah, dude, but I freaking finished Katina Mosa. Like, if you can do that, you can do absolutely anything. I think that's the coolest mindset too, because that stuff was hard, man. Like that race scares the dickens out of me just because of how hard I've heard it is. But you're like, well, I've conquered it. So it's like, well, okay, so what's next? Who knows? It could be a battle in life. It could be a battle with athletics. It could be anything. But the coolest thing is you're like, yeah, man, I'm not going to back down. I don't know, brother. We could probably go on for hours and hours. I'm curious, like, what do you say to the newcomer? What do you say to the person that might be hearing this for the first time thinking, all right, maybe I'll stop today. I'll do this tomorrow. But then what? What do you tell the newcomer into recovery? What do you tell them?
It's hard to tell them anything. I mean, the biggest thing is I know this is the way that I view it. Like I think of what would I have been receptive to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And early in recovery, like I wasn't receptive to shit. Like no one was going to tell me what to do. All you can do is give a suggestion and like lead by example and show up for those people.
Show up.
Like telling somebody to do something isn't going to work 99% of the time.
I've noticed
if that was going to work, I would have got sober decades ago.
Yep.
People telling me, because people have been telling me my whole life that I have a problem. There's something to look at, even when I was a teenager. And I did what I wanted to do.
Absolutely.
And telling me what to do was never going to work. But leading by example and being there for that person, showing up and loving them where they're at.
The real stuff.
Loving someone where they're at, regardless of what they're doing.
I've seen you do that, brother.
Is deserved. You know, people did that for me.
I've seen you do that.
Those are the things that made me open to continuing on. And people that didn't judge.
Yeah.
Loved me where I was at when I was at the bottom.
Yep.
Because I was at the bottom for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's only a few people that did.
Yeah.
But those people stand out in my heart because that's what I needed.
Yeah. I've seen you do that in very active roles. And that's why when I heard you were working with the individual we were talking about before we started, I was like, oh, good. He's in good hands. Like Jacob's got an eye on him. Like to me, I think that's the coolest thing, brother. So I've seen you do that in real time. So I appreciate that, brother. Thank you so much, man, for like finally carving out some time and getting our worlds to align. There's so much more I want to know about you, but listeners, you've been well fed. Like keep this podcast in your current up-to-date folders because you're going to want to refer to it quite a bit. This will be a beautiful podcast to give to somebody who's just even thinking about dipping their toe into recovery. And maybe even for you, if you got some limits in your head that you think you can't pass, keep this on replay as you're walking, as you're beginning, as you hit that starting line. So thank you so much, brother, for being here today. Absolutely. Listeners, share this podcast with anyone that might be struggling. Jump onto that website, Addict TO Athlete, for all of our upcoming events. Our Project Elf with our giving back Christmas endeavor. Thank you all so much, those who've been donating so far. We have 5 families right now we're serving. Applications are still open, so get a hold of us because this is the time you shouldn't have to face this alone. You got a team behind you. And until next time, be your best, turn your mess into your message.